Everyone wants to leave a legacy of positivity in the world around them. Whether you are a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a nonprofit executive director, or even a soon-to-be entrepreneur, one fact is always true. The easiest and most effective way to catalyze change in the world around you is through commerce and through business. But how do you do it? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Changemakers Collective, a place where people can come and get educated and encouraged and empowered to be the impact agent in the world around them. Brought to you by Silverback Ventures, Steph Thomas and Scott Woods have over 50 years combined experience helping companies and owners amplify the voice and multiply the impact of purpose-driven businesses. Join us each week as we discuss what it means to live a life of purpose on purpose.
Okay, well, welcome back to Silverback Ventures, Changemaker Collectives. We are laughing at each other in the background.
Yes, this is going to be a good one. Make sure you stick around.
I'm Stephanie.
I'm Scott, and Steph is getting ready to give me the verbal beat down. So, yes, let's get into it.
So this is part 2, intern versus volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Versus employee.
Versus employee. So if you did not catch part 1, make sure that you catch how to have an intern. Part 2, we're going to talk about public services, religious entities, and humanitarian companies. A lot of times we'll have a volunteer to heft the load. So we're really focusing on that space today.
So whether you're a volunteer or you're an organization that's looking for volunteers, you need to be paying attention to what we're about to have a conversation around.
You know, you just said that, and I thought a lot of times in where you have volunteers, you'll hear a staff member say, well, I was voluntold. So let's talk about that for just a second, because that's a sore spot for me, right?
Sure.
Staff members that work 32 hours, so you're a full-time staff member or you're a part-time staff member, and you're getting paid for an area. So let's just say that you were hired full-time to be the admin.
Okay.
So the expectation of when your day ends, you cannot be expected to then volunteer another 3 hours working the exact same job. You have to be paid for that.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying my job description says I work 32 hours a week and I'm getting paid for 32 hours a week. And my boss comes to me and says, hey, I'd like you to donate another 8 hours a week just out of the kindness of your heart doing the exact same work. That is not legal to do.
It is not legal. And if you're confused about what that looks like, there is a labor law fact sheet, 14A, that outlines that. Or you can go to the Federal Volunteer Protection Act and read through that. Now, there is a lot of language that goes on.
Where are we finding this 14A thing?
You find that on the Department of Labor.
For Fed, or is that by state?
It's by state.
Okay. All right. So if you go to the
Michigan
Department of Labor, there should be some kind of
fact sheet
around volunteers versus employees.
Right. Or you can just Google it, right? Department of Labor.
Because my guess is it could be a different number.
It could be a different number. Yeah. Good point. Good point there, Scott.
So the one that you're talking about is from where?
This is from North Carolina, South Carolina.
So, but I would venture a guess it's similar. So if you want to start there at the North Carolina Department of Labor, 14A, most states are going to have similar language is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I have looked at this in multiple.
Oh, I know
not
you have.
all of
I
them.
haven't looked at it at all. So that's why I was asking.
However, if you work 32 hours, and let's just say it's humanitarian and you are the admin of a company that boxes food, right? So your admin work, 32 hours a week. If you want to volunteer, so a employer can't force you to volunteer. If you choose to volunteer, then it can be in a whole different part. So you could be the box put togetherer or the
I think that's a new phrase.
It's
the
a new
box
phrase.
put togetherer.
Right. Or you can be the food coordinator.
So let me ask you this question though. So if I'm the admin for a food distribution nonprofit,
Mm-hmm.
and I volunteer some additional time to do admin work versus being asked to volunteer to do admin work, am I in the clear, and is the employer in the clear?
Say that one more
So
time.
if my boss says, "Hey, your 32 hours is up. What you choose to do after that is on you."
Mm-hmm.
And I say as the admin, "Well, I'm going to stick around and volunteer because I want to get some additional work done, or I want to help out in some project we're working on." Is the employer now in trouble because you're doing admin work overtime when you weren't asked to?
Well, you could handle that the same way as you do in a for-profit, right? So sometimes you have employees that are salaried.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're non-exempt salary, maybe they're exempt salary, but they say, yeah, I come in early and I stay late. Well, I chose to do that. My employer didn't force or didn't ask me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Where you get in trouble is when the employer asks you to do
So
it.
from an employer standpoint, because I think both employer and employee could be listening, from an employer standpoint, you can't require a donation of time.
Correct.
You really can't even ask if they would donate their time to do the same work.
Correct.
But if the employee chooses to do that work on their own, the employer's cool. I do think, I mean, just from a documentation standpoint, I think it'd be important for the employer to say to the employee, especially if they're doing the same work, "Hey, I'm not asking you to do this. If you choose to do that, we need to have an understanding so that the employee doesn't come back 6 months later and says, 'Hey, well, I worked overtime all these hours and you didn't give it to me.'"
Well, so I mean that's a thing, right?
Yeah,
So
no, that's what I'm saying.
if you
I've been
if
through
an
labor audits,
audit,
and it
right?
is not spectacular.
And here's the other thing that employers sometimes miss. The onus is on the employer to
Mhm.
prove.
That's correct.
If the employee says, "Well, they asked me to work 30 extra hours and didn't pay me," you need to have some kind of way.
So how does the employer get around that, right? So in my example where I'm an admin and I'm contracted or paid to work 32 hours, and I say, "Well, I'm going to come in on my own time and basically donate another 8 hours to get this work done." How does the employer not put themselves in a squishy position where they be subject to an audit?
Okay, so and you got to come at this at two different ways. So if it's an hourly employee, then you have to have a conversation around because there could be worker comp issues, there could be anything, and you just have a conversation. Hey, you got to clock in and you got to clock out.
Right. And to your point originally, when we originally started this conversation was, hey, if you wanted to volunteer in an area that is not your regular
Cannot
job.
be related.
I think
right.
that's the easy way to do that, right? So if
Mhm.
I'm the employer, I'm saying, "Hey, you're being paid 32 hours a week. You got an admin job. If you choose to come in and want to volunteer to help the organization, you cannot do it in your role. You need to come in and volunteer as the box putter togetherer person."
Mhm. That's the word.
Or the assembler of those
There you go.
boxes.
Oh,
I actually
it's
do
good to
like
have
box
fun.
putter togetherer
Yeah,
person
that's
thing.
that's the thing. That's the
Yes.
topic.
Okay.
Okay, so
Moving on. Sorry.
so okay, another big thing is um I was working with a group and they said, "Well, we're giving every single volunteer a $50 gas card a week." And I'm like,
Mm,
"Okay."
mm,
So you may need to look at that because there's some IRS ramifications
yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Um, or another one said, "Well, we pay them just a little bit." Okay, well, that's a part-time employee,
Yeah.
and you need
No.
to pay
No.
them
No. 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 No.
part-time
No. No. No.
wages.
As a former CFO and somebody who's been through several both financial audits for profits and financial audits for audit every year for a nonprofit, you cannot contractually pay a volunteer anything. If you pay them, you have to pay them under the labor laws, minimum wage, whatever the case may be. And then, to your point, Steph, they are a part-time employee.
Right.
If you want to give them a gift at the end of the term or on an annualized basis, or feed them or whatever, fine.
Okay, so let's
do
talk
that.
about that, right? So, because that gets brought up a lot. Well, how do you do that? Because we are excited that they're helping us, and we just want to sew back into their life. Well, there's ways to do that, right? So,
And keep in mind, the volunteer is not volunteering to get stuff.
no,
They're
passionate about what you're doing.
What you have to think about. The volunteer is going to volunteer whether you give them a Chick-fil-A sandwich or not.
So a lot of times I talk about.
Well, that sounds like I'm a taskmaster.
I know,
I'm
right?
truly not. But
so let's talk through this a little bit because it's a pain point for me, right? I get very frustrated when people say, well, we'll just bring in a group of volunteers. What are you going to have them do? I stole this language from a local church, but also there's a book by Ferguson is his last name, and it's just called The Volunteer. But he talks about language matters, right? Paid staff versus unpaid staff. So your unpaid staff would be your volunteers. Some people call them servant leaders. Some people call them
volunteers.
Volunteers. Bring them in. So they're volunteer
persons.
You bring them in, but you have something for them to do. So you are creating an expectation.
Come on.
Then they want to be there, right? Okay, then maybe you want to feed them. Maybe you bring in pizzas. Maybe it's an event that they're volunteering for. You can feed them. Maybe you have gas cards available if a volunteer wants to take one. You're not handing it to them. You're not giving them an expectation. You're not laying out every volunteer gets one, but every volunteer could have access to one. So you're not differentiating. Good. So there's ways to give back to your volunteers, but by the very definition, they are volunteering their time.
I think the sentiment for the organization to want to honor the people that are volunteering is fantastic.
Absolutely.
But there needs to be a gift back, not a you do this and I give you that. Because then you could easily create an employee relationship. If there is a gift for service, you could run yourself into a problem if it's a gift of any size.
Right. So again,
back to your gas card thing. If you're saying, hey, if you volunteer with us, we're going to give you a $50 gas card every week, assuming you're volunteering, could easily be.
Well, if it's more than $500, then
they're going to get a 1099.
Right.
That's absolutely true. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, you'd absolutely give them a 1099 and you're a volunteer. That's not what you want.
Right.
You're volunteering because you care about the cause. You are getting volunteers because they care about the cause. And if you're really good at sharing your vision and how those volunteers, to your point, are going to have an integral role in helping you deliver on your promise, everybody wins.
So let's talk through this a little bit. So there's event volunteers. And if it's a large enough event, you should have an event coordinator.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And the event coordinator is not a volunteer. That's a paid staff person.
Correct.
I mean, volunteers want to do a good job, but, they're not in the business every day and they're showing up for the event. And so either you are doing a prep to the day where you have a meeting with all the volunteers so they know what to wear, they know what they're doing, they know all the stuff. They know where to be, they know when that task is over, where to go next. There's a clear plan. But there are some companies that have volunteers that show up every day, right? So same thing. Sit down, find out what the volunteers' passion are. Do they line up with your core values? Because at the end of the day, a volunteer is going to go out into the community and at some level represent who you are.
We talk about all the time our desire to be amplifiers and multipliers. And we're going to talk in an upcoming episode about what it means to be on the board. This is exactly what we're talking about. People that are coming in because they're passionate about what you're doing and how you're going to change the world, what problem you're going to solve, are your amplifiers. They need to understand what their role is. The worst thing you can do, because we've all been in a situation we were asked and volunteered our time and showed up and didn't have anything to do. And the first thing you go is like, I'm never going to do this again.
Right. Why do they have me here?
There was nothing for me to do. I stood around. I just wasted all this time.
I didn't even know where to go.
Correct.
Like I drove into the parking lot with everyone else.
Yep.
And I got out of my car and I am
Nobody said
like,
hello to me. Nobody gave me any direction. Nobody pointed me
no,
in where
I
I
have
needed to
on the
go.
shirt that they
Yep.
told me to wear. So I'm clearly a volunteer. And then I went home and was like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. And you are extraordinarily good about this because you work with one of our clients in kind of volunteer coordination, and you make every volunteer feel like they're part of the team, even though they may only show up for an event, or even though they come in once a week and do somewhat routine and menial office work. That's what they're coming. They're coming for the community, and they're coming because they believe in the mission and the vision of the organization.
It's funny that you said that. Thank you, by the way. So 2 different events, 2 different companies. The one company, large event, 100 plus volunteers.
Okay.
The volunteer coordinator came in, said, you're volunteering. I'm going to tell you where to go for the day. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do for the day. If I come across with an attitude, well, I'm busy today. Well, okay. The volunteers were like, what did I sign
Let me
up
turn
for?
my shirt back in and go back home.
I mean, you just don't, be kind. They're volunteering their time. Flip side of that, large event. The volunteers show up, regardless of their age. Volunteers come in 16 to 160 if you live to be that long, right? So
that would be impressive.
Yeah, it is. If
Chris just said, if you're a sea turtle.
I love her.
Yes, if we could get sea turtles to volunteer, that would be amazing.
Okay, but find a place for everybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, we work at an organization that has, how old is she?
Oh, she was like mid-80s.
Yeah, that would come in every single week, would sit down, would do the most routine task that nobody wants to do because she loved the organization.
But
she had clear expectations as to what she was going to do.
Absolutely. The volunteer coordinator welcomed everyone, treated everyone with respect, thanked them for their time, asked them, here's the areas that we can use a volunteer. What best suits your personality? Can you stand all day? Do you need to take breaks? Can you sit? So
can you speak?
Right.
I'm amazed at the number of organizations that will bring volunteers and say, okay, you 5 over there, you're in charge of greeting every single person that comes in here. And you've just picked 5 of the most introverted people in the entire room. They didn't even ask them what they wanted to do. All of a sudden, those volunteers are sweating like crazy going, I don't want to do any of that.
Well, they disappear.
Yeah.
So what happens
they
is
go to
they
the
stand
bathroom
there
and they never come back.
Right.
That's absolutely true.
Again, I am really big on treating your unpaid staff like they are an integral part of your business.
They are. Let's be straight. I mean, we're talking about this as if it's some kind of weird arrangement.
It's not.
You should treat your staff this way. Your job as oh man, come on. This is craziness. Your job as the leader is to set vision, create clear expectations, create the metrics to manage those expectations, and inspect what you expect.
There you go.
If you are not doing those things, you are not a leader. And if you are not encouraging and empowering and enabling your team to do their job, you are not a leader. Step out of the way and get somebody else. And it's no different for the volunteers. You have to treat them even better than you treat your employees because they're not getting paid.
Right.
You should be extraordinarily gracious to the people that are giving up their time where they could be doing anything else because you've done a fairly okay job selling the mission and the vision of your organization.
Let me ask this. Can volunteers do everything at every company?
See, now you're creating a mess. I told you guys she was going to get on me. No, they can't do everything. As an organization, you have to be very, and from a legal and from a liability standpoint and from a tax standpoint, you have to be careful what you're giving people exposure to and asking them to have responsibilities.
What if they sign a non-disclosure?
It's no different. It's no different. It's no different than having an intern, really. I mean, your volunteers, different from interns, your volunteers should be fillers of gaps where you could bring in and replace those people over and over and over and over. It's got to be routine processes, or you got to have an event-based volunteer thing. Okay, well, I need you to help with the food, or I need you to help with setting up tables and chairs, whatever the case may be. You should not have a volunteer come in and do your accounting.
Right. So it's exactly where I was going to go next. So we were talking with someone, and their volunteer was their accounting person.
Yes.
And now, when you dug into that, the volunteer was their mother.
Yeah, they were all related.
Right. But is that who you want to do that? So,
well, not only that,
not long term.
You have a situation where, especially if you're asking family members to volunteer, I would question whether you actually have a real business. And if you're starting and you need volunteers to fill gaps for you, you're better off having a board, which we'll talk about in the upcoming episode, that fills those gaps versus having a family member who you may have to replace as your business grows.
Well, I started to say, have a short-term plan, right?
Yes.
So if you're a startup, you have an intimate person that is volunteering their time. That's one thing. But don't bring someone in off the street that is a retired accountant.
Yeah. Well, the other piece of that puzzle is if you're starting, and I know if you're starting and you have unpaid staff and you're trying to understand how well your business is doing, and you're not counting the value or the cost of having those roles filled, you have a view of your business that's not real. You have a view of your business that's not real, because if I have a volunteer doing my accounting and I would be paying that person, a bookkeeper, $25, $30, $50 an hour, and I'm not counting any of that expense, and I'm looking like, oh yeah, my business is doing fantastic. Well, actually, if you paid that person who's doing your books or paid that person who's being your HR person, you're not making any money at all. You get a distorted view of how your business is doing.
So as we wrap up, interns are one thing. Volunteers are another.
Treat your people right.
Just do right by
Come
people.
On. They're supporting you and helping you build your business. And if you're volunteering, make sure you understand and ask for clear direction as to what you're going to do.
That should be an expectation of a volunteer. So as you continue to live a life of purpose on purpose, check out our other podcasts at Silverback Ventures. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to the Changemakers Collective. If you've enjoyed this episode, please help us grow our community by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast or rating us on Spotify.
You can also find our podcast on YouTube, so you can come and leave us a comment over there as well. If you want support growing your business and scaling your vision, visit us at silverbackventures.org or connect with us on LinkedIn.
Thanks again, and we'll see you on our next episode.